Well then, let's return to the story I was telling you about a short while ago, day two of Rupert Murdoch's a compelling appearance, really, before the Leveson Inquiry into press standards, and his assertion that there was a cover-up, in his view, at the News of the World, which kept the extent of phone hacking hidden from him as the big boss. That has, of course, as I was telling you, been challenged by the former legal manager at News International, Tom Crone, put out a very strong statement saying that he described the allegation of a cover-up as, and I'm quoting, a shameful lie. Let's talk to someone who knows the Murdoch business inside out, because he had a close working relationship and was in a senior position. Phil Hall, former editor of the News of the World. And Phil, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Well, first of all, let me ask directly what lots of viewers are asking, by the way. Rupert Murdoch, this phenomenally driven, energetic, focused businessman, is the victim of some kind of cover-up on his beloved News of the World. Can we believe that?
I can believe it. I mean, he's got 50,000 employees around the world, and he keeps in touch with the editors, but he doesn't keep in touch with every member of staff. Clearly, if people wanted to deceive him, they could, but not. I wouldn't have thought for such a long period of time, if I'm honest. But I think he admitted that himself. He said, there was an opportunity when Clive Goodman wrote a letter saying this is widespread. He didn't investigate it, and I've got to tell you, the Rupert Murdoch I work for would have done. I just think he's now 80. He's got a global organisation to run, and he can't keep his hand on the detail like he used to.
So the Rupert Murdoch you knew would have intervened straight away, do you think?
Well, Rupert was on the phone every single week, and one Saturday in 4 he was in my office. He always gave the editors the right to run whatever they felt they should run in their newspaper, but he would argue and question the public interest, whether you had enough proof, whether this was balanced, was it really fair to be doing this story. So he set a standard that everybody knew was there, and it was always in the back of your mind that that standard had to be adhered to. And I didn't get sued once in 5 years. We had 110 people. We were writing controversial stories, but he had that absolute blueprint across the newspaper. And I think what he admitted today was maybe he's allowed that to slip.
Was he the kind of boss who could be challenged, that you felt you could challenge without danger?
You saw him today. That was the real Rupert Murdoch. He would sit there and think. He'd listen to your argument. Sometimes he'd say, "I don't agree with you, but it's your call," and it always was the editor's call. I know people don't believe that he doesn't interfere in the newspapers, but that is the way it was. But you've got to remember, this man travels the globe. He meets presidents, prime ministers, economic gurus. When you're arguing with him about the economy, he's got a point of view you've got to listen to. So, forceful but didn't interfere.
Just a quick comment from you on that very strong response from Tom Crone. What did you make of that? Do you think that was a wise response?
I was surprised, because Tom Crone is a man of integrity. I've known him many, many years. He cared passionately about the News of the World, and frankly, I don't believe he would be involved in a cover-up, but somewhere along the line something's gone wrong. The checks and balances that should have been in place weren't in place, and I was surprised that Mr. Murdoch would refer to a lawyer specifically, but I think he really feels the system let him down.
Do you think Mr. Crone was right to respond like that?
I guess, he's a man who takes great pride in what he's done, and he was connected to the paper for 20 years. And see, what changed in my time, we had a lot of reporters who'd been around the paper for 40, 50 years, and their eyes and ears, they could smell a problem, at a mile. And I think that stopped. A younger team came in, and maybe there were, he's suggesting there were devious people among the staff, and people were being bamboozled. And I guess we'll see that whether that's true when the legal inquiry goes further.
Can I ask you about reputational damage, because he did refer specifically to that, and your sense of how damaged this outfit is, if I can call it an outfit, a big empire, because once you really damage the trust between you and your readers, it takes a very, very long time to rebuild that trust.
One of the oldest sayings in newspapers is it's very easy to lose a reader. Very hard to win them, very easy to lose them, and that trust had gone, and that's why I think he closed the paper. I think he was strong, and he took a strong decision. I mean, the paper was making him £70–80 million profit a year. He closed it. So I think he rebuilt the trust with that, and I think the Sun newspaper circulation has not been affected. You've got to remember the Times and the Sunday Times wouldn't even be here without Murdoch, because they don't make any money. He does it because he's passionate about the newspapers. I think anybody who would think a proprietor of a newspaper and the senior staff are not talking to politicians is mad. Of course it happens. Mark Thompson and the BBC, he'll be talking to prime ministers. Will he be arguing the BBC's case? Of course he will. So I think it's crazy to try and stop all contact or all relationship. Clearly, if you're acting upon it, and I think what Murdoch said today, you've got to be very clear about what's illegal, what's unethical, and what he thinks is reasonable and right in today's circumstances.
One other point I wanted to raise, Phil, if I may. There was an interesting reference there to the other big giant in the press in Britain, which is the Daily Mail, Paul Dacre, who's in charge there. Mr Murdoch seemingly critical of the fact that Mr Dacre had acknowledged there were commercial drivers, if you like, in the way that papers are put together. Really? I mean, is that something we should be surprised about?
Well, you've got to remember, you know, one of my stories I did a story about Jeffrey Archer, and Jeffrey Archer's books were published by Rupert Murdoch. So, you know, we did what we had to do, and commercial interest income. Clearly, if you had a supermarket spending hundreds of millions of pounds with your newspaper, and somebody gave you a trivial story about them, I think sometimes you would think, but if it was a story that was in the public interest and significant, then you would run it. I think there's no editor that's not going to be at least pragmatic about it, but no, stories weren't being spiked because somebody was spending advertising.
So for that reason, Mr Murdoch's criticism today is, well, let's just say, difficult to put in context.
Don't ever forget that Rupert Murdoch loves a public spat, and to have a little dig at the Daily Mail is would appeal to his sense of humour. He's somebody who's passionate about his newspapers and about his company. He believes in them, he's put everything into them, he's a newspaper man at heart, and I think he said today, you know, one of the great issues that Leveson's got is trying to somehow police or change regulations on newspapers. When you've got the internet coming along like a runaway train with completely unpoliced, how are you going to change the regulations regarding the press when you've got that problem? By all means, stamp out illegal behaviour. Of course, illegal activity shouldn't happen anywhere. But as far as changing the regulations for the press, that's going to be a real challenge for Leveson, I think.
And just a final thought, Phil, if I can. You know, it's a very long time he spent giving evidence now, yesterday and today. You mentioned his age. I'm just wondering whether you think, knowing him as you do, that he will be relatively satisfied with the way he's performed. I
think he showed that when he addressed Parliament, he was in shock. He said today, I panicked. You could see a man who... And integrity is at the very heart of what he does. He's very hard on his newspapers when they make mistakes. And I think he felt humiliated, humbled. His son was there. He was also humiliated. I think you saw the old Rupert Murdoch today. He said, you know, he should have gone in there and gone right through that newspaper and cleaned it out. And, you know, he was forceful, strong. And I think, you know, you can see at 80, he'll go on for another 10 years, I'm sure, at least.
OK, Phil, thanks very much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Phil Holder. Now, the Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is facing